Hello, and welcome to today's tutorial about I had a subscriber ask me, how do I take my LXC containers that are behind the private network, usually it's 10.0.3.x, and forward them to the primary server, which is usually 192.168.1.x. So you have two networks here, the LXC network and the server network it's running on. Usually they're both private networks. 10.0.3 is a private and 192.168.1 is also private. So the first thing you want to do here is install apt-get bridge-utils. I already have this installed, and basically what we're going to do is take the Ethernet adapter, which is on the server's eth0, and bridge it to br0. So if we go to ECT networks, we open up this interface file, I have this already configured. I'm going to say eth0 is a manual interface, and I want it to be static, and the bridge port is eth0, and this is going to be our static IP. And our gateway is our internet, and let's add some Google DNS servers. And I recommend quitting out of this file and rebooting your server and making sure that when you do ifconfig less here, you'll see br0 and you get the correct IP address, 192.168.1.10. If you ping the server, it works. If you ping google.com, it works. You can ping your DNS servers, that's all works. Okay, so if you don't have physical access to your machine, say it's at a data center, I would recommend having someone at the data center do this. If you're trying to do LXC and stuff in Amazon, it's a little bit more complicated because if you screw it up, you're not going to have access to the server. So this is basically for servers you have access to. Okay, so now that we have the network bridge adapter set up, this br0, we're going to create a new LXC container. And I'm going to create a server called prod1 web server. So we're going to start creating some production web servers in our LXC containers. So let's create this. And once this is done, the reason I have to do like this dist ubuntu and download stuff is because this is Linux Mint. You should, on a Ubuntu server, just do LXC create, the name, and that's it. You don't need to do anything else on a Ubuntu 14.04 LTS long-term support server. The reason I'm doing all this is because this is a Linux Mint desktop environment 1. So, just forewarning when you're configuring servers. This is just for this demo. Okay, let's start it. Let's attach to it. Okay, let's check the IP address of this new LXC container. Okay, we have 10.0.3.76. Now I recommend setting also a static IP address for your LXC containers, especially for the production ones. But that's outside the scope of this. Just Google set static IP address for LXC containers. You'll find it pretty quickly how to do this. Okay, so I'm going to bring up a new terminal, and the way you control how the LXC containers have access to the internet, have access to, Apache or other web services or even SSH is through Iptables. So the first script I put on all my my LXC servers is this iptables off script. So if you just do, I wrote this already, it's a simple bash script, and it just does a couple commands. It flushes the tables, it clears out the NAT rules, it tells input, output, forward, all to accept. So you want to also do apt-get install Iptables if you don't have it. Most Linux machines have Iptables already. If you're using Red Hat, CentOS, it should have Iptables as well. So if this script is an executable, you want to do that and change it, and let's run that. And now let's run the command that's going to spit out any rules we have. So just iptables -t, nat, -l, -n, -verbose. And it's basically just going to show you an output accept, 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 accept. And it just shows you all the different rules we have. So we don't have any rules defined yet. So it's basically iptables off is in the current state of the way it's set up. Now if you have a machine that's remotely set up, say at a data center, and you don't have physical access to it and you don't want to go there in case you screw it up, I recommend creating a cron tab entry that says every 10 minutes let's turn off iptables. Now it's a little strange to do this because all of a sudden your rules may not work as you're testing. But if you break your machine and you can't SSH into it, this will get you back in every 10 minutes. You'll just have to wait and then you'll be able to get back into your server. So since I have physical access to this, I'm not going to worry about this, but this is a little trick I've seen sysadmins do. Hey, iptables, every 10 minutes reset yourself just in case I screw you up and I can't get back into the server. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is a couple commands that enable forwarding on Linux as well as give internet access to this machine. So if I do ping google.com, this is the LXC container now. You can see DNS works, but it's not pinging correctly. So it doesn't have access to the internet correctly. So let's fix that. So we're going to go back to the main machine it's running on. We're going to execute a couple commands. The first command is this. Iptables, net, post routing. It's basically saying this network give full access to BR0. Okay. The other thing you want to make sure you do is enable forwarding, IP packet forwarding in the kernel. And to do that, there's a couple ways to do it. The first is you want to edit this file, and at the bottom put net IPv4 IPv forwarding equals 1. This will allow the forwarding to work after you reboot the server. So sometimes, and you can see even here, it has IPv6 forwarding starting to come into setup too. So just forewarning, this helps the server after a reboot. If you've ever set kernel parameters, you have to make sure you set them in a file or it won't be changed the next time you reboot. Okay? So we want to just change it now. So let's just do echo 1 proc sysnet IPv4 IPv forwarding. And to confirm that worked, you can just do cat. You'll get 1. That means forwarding works. Let's go back to the LXC container. And now pinging Google works. Okay, so now we have internet access. Let's run some updates. And after that's done, we're going to actually install a web server. And we're just going to install Apache because that's a typical web server used on many Linux machines. So once this is done, let's install Apache. Okay. Okay, let's see. This IP address. So this IP address is 10.0.3.76. So if I come over here and bring this browser, this is currently working. Now this is the local server, and you expect it to work. But the problem is that this IP address is not going to work in other machines on your network with the 192.168.x address. And the way you have to fix that is you're going to do forwarding with Iptables. So let's set that up. So the first thing I want to do here, just to prove this is the LXC container, let's do test.html. We can just do so there you go. You get hello from the LXC container. Okay, so the next command I want to show you is how to forward it. So it's pretty simple iptables command. So now we're back outside the LXC container. This is the server it's running on, so I do LXC list. You'll see prod web server here. And here's the iptables command. And basically it's just setting up forwarding to whatever machine you want and what ports you want. So our IP address here is .76. You want to do 76 here, and Apache is listening on 80 here, and we're going to say let's forward this to 8080 on 192.168.10. And now once we have that command executed, you can look at your IP table rules here with this command again. So here's our forwarding of the web server, and this is the masquerading stuff that allows for internet access. Now the one weird thing here is that if you do 192.168.1.10 8080 here, this doesn't work here. And I'm not sure why. It needs another iptables rule. If you know what it is, you can throw it in the comments. But on a remote machine, this will work. So let's go into another machine that I have. So this is my laptop sitting here next to me. And you can see it's a different IP. It's 112. Now if I do links, which is a text-based web browser, and we do 1.10.8080 test.html, this is going to say welcome to the LXC container thing. There you go. Hello from the LXC container. So just like that, you're forwarding. So I'll show you that one more time. We're going from 192.168.10.8080, which is going to our server running the LXC container here. This 10.8080 is then forwarding into the LXC container behind the private network. 10.0.3.76:80. So let's do one more rule, and let's get it SSH access into the LXC container from all the rest of the network. So let's clear this, and instead of port 80, let's do 22. And the other thing I gotta make sure is, so now I'm in the LXC container, let's make sure we have SSH installed first. That's important. You're not going to get into the machine very easily unless you have SSH enabled. And the next thing you want to do is set a password. There's a bunch of restrictions on the root user for SSH. So instead of SSH into the server under root, let's use Ubuntu instead. It's safer, and Ubuntu has sudo access, so I recommend always SSHing into as Ubuntu if you're using a password. You can also set up SSH keys. I showed that in the last tutorial. If you want to do that, SSH keys will also work for this. So let's go back to the here where we're creating our rule, and instead of 8080, let's forward SSH on port 8081. And let's bring up the rules again. And you can see 8081 is now pointed at 22, 8080 is pointed at 80. So here's my remote laptop again, just to prove that. You can see WLAN. It's not BR0. It's not our LXC container either. This is a wireless adapter. So now you can just do SSH Ubuntu at 192.168.1.10, and you have to specify the port, which was 8081. You don't want to go into just 10 because that's going to get you into your LXC server. That's what's running the LXC container. You want to go even further into the back end of the LXC containers. I actually got to remove this because I tried to do this before and it didn't work, so this is the second time I'm doing this tutorial. So let's SSH, yes, enter the password, and once you have it correct, now I am going from my remote laptop into the 192.168.1.10, but then I'm going into the LXC container, and now if you get ifconfig here, you're now all the way to the back of your LXC containers, and inside here you can go into var lib or www.html, and here's the test. And if you're root, you can always switch to root here under the Ubuntu user here. And this just shows you that we are in the LXC container. Let's change these to 1, make it bigger. And let's quit out of this. And there you go. You have iptables. The last thing you want to do is save the iptables, because you don't want to reboot the server and then have all the rules deleted. So there's a couple commands you can do here to save them. Most of the time your server shouldn't have any problems staying up. The one thing I kind of recommend you doing is not starting the iptables all the time at the beginning of the server, like just automatically. I recommend the server starting and then you loading the iptables. So the easiest way to do this is just do iptables save, and you just do an output, and you just can do iptables on.sh, and you can actually look at them if you wanted to. It's a lot different than and you can see it was generated by iptables save, and then we can do change mode X. So let's actually turn off the iptables, and now you can see here, let's try to do this is going to break now. This won't work. See? Unable to connect to host because we turned off iptables. We can't even SSH into it anymore. Right. Connection refused. So let's re-enable them again. So we could just do iptables on. And that's pretty bad that actually, you actually can't run this command. You actually have to do iptables restore. Sorry. You want to do iptables on. And this should do it. There you go. So now let's go back to here and do hello from the LXC container works again. SSH works again. So those are the two commands. iptables save and iptables restore. So that's how you can get the iptables to load on and off. You can schedule them automatically, but if there's a problem with your iptables, I recommend not doing that, because if you saved them and there was an issue, the server might not be able to start correctly. So my recommendation is let the server boot and then restore your iptables. If your servers are going up and down because of other issues, then you've got bigger problems to deal with. But that's how iptables and LXC containers can communicate throughout the system. The only other thing I recommend doing is make sure that you, when you're creating these forwards here, you start with a high port number. I like to start with 8080 or higher. You can even do like 9000 and up. You have access to a lot of ports here. You can do 9000 up to 10,000, I believe, or 9999, which would give you 999 forward ports. iptables does require CPU cycles and forwarding, so take it into consideration when you're creating tons and tons of LXC containers, that iptables will take a toll on the system, and you should see iptables spawning here on the top when you have high load. So just forewarning, iptables does require some CPU cycles in order to forward all those packets and stuff to the back end. So just watch that and make sure you have enough resources on your server to forward all your systems back to the private network of, and it's usually 10.0.3.x. And I think that should do it for iptables and routing to the back of the LXC containers. And you can use this for LXD containers. You can use this for other services. You can use this for KVM services as well. And thanks for watching, and please subscribe.